Jesus is in his last discourse. When you go to Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus doesn't do this much teaching necessarily at the end of his life. We get the events, the foot washing, the table overturning, the Last Supper, a few teachings here and there, and the Garden of Gethsemane. John takes a different approach. If you ever want to, just read through the Gospels. And at the end of the Gospels, you will find that the crucifixion and the Holy Week start usually 4 or 5 chapters back. But in John chapter 21 is the last chapter. Holy Week starts in John chapter 12. And so he does a lot more teaching. And this I am the vine is part of the teaching of that Holy Week. It's his farewell discourse. He's trying to give them some comfort, and he's also trying to teach them what does it look like to live when Christ is not present physically with them. I am the vine, you are the branches. Abide in me. Another word that we often hear is abide in me. Abide. We abide by the law. Some of us abide by the speed limit. Some of us abide by the speed limit begrudgingly. Some of us are not good at abiding by the speed limit and pray that we don't see any of Mary Carson's friends out on the road. And we try to remember, I know Mary Carson, does that help? No. Abiding by the speed, but it's not the same thing. Abiding by the law is not relational. That is, I don't want to get caught. I don't want to have to pay the fine. I don't want to have to deal with the consequences. Jesus isn't talking about that like that. We get this, we have that sometimes understanding of God, this God who is out to get us. And I think Jesus came to do away with that picture of God. God isn't out to get us. God is a parent. And you're not out to get your children, but you want the best for your children. And so there's discipline that happens because you know if they continue acting like that, they're not going to have any friends. They're not going to make it into a good school. They're not going to have the best start that they can. And you want to give them the best start into life as possible. God is a father, a parent type, who knows that if we stay selfish and we feed the selfish part of us and become more selfish, it's going to break relationships. It's going to cause heartache and pain. God knows that if we stay in our sin of bitterness or letting our anger control us or our fear control us, that it breaks relationship, that it's going to cause pain, and we are not going to thrive as human beings. And so Jesus is giving us a different picture of God that the world usually has. Oftentimes we see God as that vending machine. If I just give him the right offering, if I do the right thing, God has to work for me. God has to answer this prayer. And it's oftentimes how many religions have, over the course of history, worked. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures and the Greco-Roman world, you said your prayers to a certain God so that enough rain would come. You would do certain things so that you could have a lot of kids, or you do things in order to be blessed. And Jesus is saying, that's not how I work. That's not how God works. God is in relationship like a vine and a branch. Now, this is an interesting illustration, because if we go back to, especially the book of Isaiah, but we go back to the Hebrew scriptures, we find that Israel is often considered the vineyard, the vine. And God is the gardener, and oftentimes God is saying, all right, I'm going to start pruning here, and I'm going to lay waste to you because you're not bearing fruit. now start again. That you're not bearing the fruit that you're supposed to be bearing. And so I'm going to prune. Israel is the vine. We get to this scripture and something interesting. God is still the vineyard grower, the gardener, the keeper. But Jesus, who is God in flesh, becomes the vine. And we're branches off of that vine. It's no longer this God out there, but there's this connecting. I am going to be what nourishes you. I'm going to be what gives you the power to produce the fruit. I am the one who is going to, I'm actively involved here, Jesus is saying. God is not just the outside gardener just chopping the fruit and chopping off branches. No, God is connected to us. God wants us to see God like the bread of life that we can't live without. That is the staple food. And so just like I don't eat once a week, my spiritual life needs to be fed daily, not just once a week. Jesus is the vine. I don't need to do this Christian life on my own. Because, when I do it on my own, my love often has limits. My graciousness has limits. And I like to sit there and say, I'm just defending myself. But oftentimes when I'm just defending myself, I'm also not being very Christian. I'm not doing it in love. Not saying that we don't have to defend. We can't sit there and stand up and say, well, no, this is too far. But there is a mean way of doing it, and there is a Christ-like way of doing it. See, Christ in me will push me past the limit of my patience, past the limit of my love, past the limit of my forgiveness, past the limit of my kindness to a love that is outside of myself. I didn't think I could do it, but something in me pushed me. There is this relationship, this connection. We are a people that love to do. We want to do and do and do. Give us tasks. Give us what we should be doing. And Jesus here is saying, be connected. Just like we talked about last week with the sheep. The sheep know my voice. Waste time with God. I can tell you this right now. There are times that I am in this sanctuary during the week when nobody else is in the building, and I am sitting here in prayer and in silence, and nothing will happen. I won't hear anything from God. I won't feel anything. I'm just here. And there are other times that I'm here, and all of a sudden, I'm hit. There's something inside me that starts to stir, and I go, yes. Yes. Take me there. Oh, yes, that's the prayer I need to pray. Yes, that's the place I need to go. It doesn't happen every time I'm sitting in here. But if I decided that, well, I'm wasting time when it's not happening and I'm not hearing anything, just being in the presence of God should be enough. Being in the presence of God should be enough. Practicing that presence, even when it feels like a waste of time, prepares me for the times when God has something. Yes, this is where you need to go. This is what you need to do. Yes, forgive. Yes, go there. Yes. only happens when I practice the presence of God and I realize that some of the best times are when nothing is said and nothing happens and I just sit in the presence of God. It actually reminds me a lot of my grandfather. My grandfather, Dodie, I would spend hours with him, especially after he had his stroke. And my grandmother would want to go out, so I'd go and sit with my grandfather. We'd spend an hour and nobody'd say anything. But I was in my presence with my grandfather. And it was the best place to be. And I can tell you, I had a special relationship with him. I could leave and I know I was fully loved. We could sit on the porch, watch the storms come in from Lake Erie, and it was security, it was peace. And when my grandfather did have to say something, man, I listened. We're not a people that like to slow down and just listen. We don't want to waste time because this person in the family needs to be here, and I need to be here, and I need to do this, and I need to do that, and this has to happen. And God says, I'm the God of the Sabbath. Slow down, stop. Just be in my presence. Be connected. Because when we find that we just connect with God, we will start hearing the voice of the shepherd. We will start finding purpose, direction. We will find God in the oddest places in our life, at work. We will have a new perspective on things. But we need to be connected. Instead of just doing, we need to take the time to waste time with God. Just be in God's presence. Now, all of us have different ways that we experience God's presence. For some of us, it is in silence. For some of us, it is walking in nature. For some of us, it's in worship service, small group. It's in community. I always tell everybody we have to try different things, because my finding God in silence is great. But man, when I am in the presence of other people and hearing what God is doing in your life, it's just as important. Because God will take me in a different direction with you. But I can't always spend my time with just you. I need to have the time that is quiet. We need to mix it up with God. Just like you wouldn't be happy if your husband or wife kept on wanting to go to movies on their date. You have a date night, and you just keep on going to the movies. Maybe switch it up a little. We need to do something different. That's it. With God, the same thing. Spend different ways with God. The other place that we find God is here in the sacrament of communion. If we understood the power of this table and Christ's presence at this table, we'd be asking for the biggest piece of bread. We'd be asking for the whole chalice. We'd be asking for it every week. John Wesley was someone who sat there and said, I have to have communion daily. He would find a way to celebrate communion every single day because the grace of God is uniquely here. Sometimes we hurry through it, just like we hurry through life, because we're doers. Give me my list. But Christ is always here. Christ is always present. I always often think of it like kind of like hide and seek. When my grandparents and I, when I was a kid, would play hide and seek, and I'm sure you've all done this with your grandkids and your kids. You go and you hide, and then they'd find you. You had to make sure it was obvious. But then when the kid hid, you kind of acted like you didn't know where they were. gave you more peaceful times. You left them there for a while. It was great. But you'd play with that. And then as they got a little older, you'd hide in a little bit harder spot. And you'd stop making those little noises. And you might let them go till they're a little bit more frantic. Mom? Dad? And then you'd come out. That game is not just a game for fun. It's you're building relationship. Sometimes I feel like that way with God. I go to the obvious place. He's there, but maybe I don't feel the presence of God. But man, then I stumble over him in this unexpected place. And the joy of finding God there. But it's practicing the presence of Christ. And so, church, Christ is our vine. You don't have to forgive that person in your own strength. You don't have to do those good works in your own strength. You don't have to do the acts of mercy in your own strength. Do it connected to the vine. Because you'll find yourself, what used to be going through the motions all of a sudden has this drop of eternity in it. And the connection with another person or the presence of Christ becomes so real. But we have to be connected to the vine. We have to take time to slow down and waste time with God. Just like we talked about with getting relationship with my dogs and learning how to train them. Quinn has not had this time yet, and you can tell. Just sitting in their presence so that they trust you. You all know how Greta is. I could go anywhere, and she's going to find where I am and follow me. But that's after years of wasting time together. Doing silly things together. Being present. You did it with your spouses. You went on dates that were not that big of a deal. But it's how you got to know each other. You spent time. You built trust. Church, let us waste some time with God and realize that without Christ we are nothing. Amen and amen.